The stream is live. Now I'm under strict orders to give Jackie, who by the way is the behind the scenes engine of this entire call. I'm supposed to give Jackie 30 seconds to get this up and running because we're doing stuff now that's never been done. Like if you think Starlink is impressive, just wait. So can just somebody go in the chat and tell me that you can see me and hear me? Southwest Virginia, Poland, Kansas. Who can hear me? Who can see me? Anyone? John Floyd, you're telling me, yep, I'm coming in 5x5. George, yep. My phone is blowing up. This is all good. I've got people texting me about motorcycle parts, photography books. You never know what's going to happen here. All good in the visuals and audio. All right, let's get started. My name is Dan Milnor. I am Blurb's creative ambassador, and I'm sitting like this because my laptop is sitting on a giant stack of books, not because I find this particularly comfortable. But I've got some housekeeping to go over first. I want to say thank you, number one, to the Blurb staff behind the scenes who you can't see or hear for putting this on. They're the ones that are doing the digital logistical hurdles that I don't have to deal with. I just have to show up and yap like I normally do. And also thank you to everybody who's here on the chat. I'm trying to remember, I've been at Blurb for 13 years. I don't think we've ever done this before. I don't think we've ever done an image breakdown. And if we have, I am forgetting it. So it must not have been that memorable. I've got some housekeeping I need to go over. And then I've got 6 very quick points I want to talk about before we start looking at people's imagery. I'm only going to get through 12 people today. However, if I don't get to you, don't fret. Don't fear. There's more on the way. Number one, housekeeping. Our submission period for photos is over, as you can imagine. And we are hosting another one of these image breakdown live stream on October 8th, my father's birthday, for any of you with inquiring minds. Follow Blurb on social media so you know when submission opens back up again. I could see this being a consistent thing because we got a ton of submissions, and I think people are honestly looking for honest feedback about their work, and that's something that's actually quite difficult to find. Point number 2, we have 1 hour, and I'll be reviewing 10 to 12 photos today. I would say 10 to 12 people. Some people submitted a single image, and other people submitted more. I have some thoughts on that. And if I don't get to you, don't worry. We'll save it for October 8th. Please chat away in the chat, which you guys are already doing. And I see some familiar names and some strangers, so that's a good thing. And Jackie and the team are going to feed those questions to me as we go along. And let's just pinpoint some of the upcoming live streams. August 21st, there is a photo question and answer with me based on the popularity of those on my YouTube channel or my now defunct YouTube channel. Those were some of the most popular films, so I think that's going to be good. October 8th, image breakdown, and October 30th, something else. I'm not telling you what it is. You have to guess, and even if you guess, I'm still not telling you. That's coming on October 30th. Before we get started, everything we're talking about today, photographs, and I'm looking at work, and I'm telling you whether I like your work or I don't like the work or what could be improved or what I like, whatever. Ultimately, this is about putting your work in print. Now, this is my little ongoing journal that I'm using that, has lots of print in it. Hopefully you are doing the same, but printing makes you a better photographer because it forces you to apply critical thought to your work. That simple fact right there will make you better in the field. So ultimately, whatever we talk about your images and your photographs, my advice to you is to put those into print. That could mean starting with postcards, going to photographic prints, and then books, magazines, trade books, whatever suits your fancy, if you will. Now, I'm in the private. Let me go to the private chat here. Okay, we're a go, thankfully, because I've been talking for 10 minutes. I'm going to bounce back and forth like I know what I'm doing. Okay, before we get to the work, a couple of points. These are very, very important points that I hope all of you write down or at least pay attention to this first 5 minutes of our hour. I am one person with one opinion. When you show your work to someone to get feedback, if you show your work to 10 photographers, you are going to get odds on 10 different perspectives. I literally saw a fist fight in the darkroom at a newspaper in Texas two photographers, professional full-time photographers, arguing over someone's portfolio. They were looking at portfolios to pick an intern for the paper. And one photographer said, "This is the best portfolio I've ever seen." And the other photographer said, "This is the worst portfolio I've ever seen." And within 30 seconds, they were fist fighting in front of me. So that tells you the kind of level of devotion to opinion that you will find. Just remember, I'm one person, so don't take anything too personal. Number two, and this is very important, and a lot of you who expressed a little bit of trepidation about submitting your images, and I said, look, I am not here to break you down. I am not a believer in crushing someone is a great way to make you a better photographer. However, over the next hour, think about it like this. Over the next hour, I'm not your friend. I'm your editor. And when the hour is over, I will go back to being your friend. This happened to me in Los Angeles probably 20 years ago. A friend of mine in Los Angeles when I lived there was very much a big shot, big wig in the photography industry. She was a consultant. She was a strategist. She was an editor. Everybody knew her. I knew her as a friend. We never worked together professionally. We were just friends. And one day out of the blue, she says to me, "I want to see your work." And I thought innocently, fine. So I laid out a bunch of work on my 10-foot light table and she came over. And when she started looking at the work, I started trying to say something to her. And she turned around to me and said, "I'm not your friend right now. When I'm done, I will turn my hat back around and I will be your friend. But right now, my role is your editor." And I'll never forget that. And I feel the same way. Maybe we're not at the same sort of level of criticalness because we're talking about, many of you are not professional photographers. You may have no goals to be a professional photographer. And so there's maybe not as much riding on this, but the point is the same. I have to be honest and straightforward because that's what feedback is about. Number 3, label the files that you submit. Some of you did this really well, where you will have your name and the image title and the date. And so I know whose files these belong to. But some of you submitted files that were like DCS dot a 12-digit number, some kind of thing, and all the files were different titles. So try to keep consistent because remember, if all these files got scattered and I needed to quickly look through these as an editor, I need to know whose they were, how I can categorize these very quickly. So make sure you label your files correctly. And that's not just for this image breakdown. That's just for life in general, people. The next point is send more than one image. A couple of the people that we're going to look at today only sent one image. So I don't want to discriminate against those folks, but give me a little more of what you're up to. I think it's better. It's hard for me to really get a gauge of you as a photographer with a single photograph. So send a few more, knock yourself out. It's a free country. Take advantage. Okay. The next point is think about theme. Think about theme instead of random images. And if you are going to send random images, make sure that you write that in the description that, hey, dude, these are random pictures. This is not a theme. Bastian, if you're out there, you did this. You said to me, hey, 5 random pics, don't have a theme. Great. Now I know what I'm working with. So think about theme. I've been historically a theme shooter my entire career, even though I worked newspapers for many years where oftentimes your assignment boiled down to a single image, but I had to work in, I was always thinking in themes. And the last point is anytime you submit images somewhere, you're going to want to have a written statement that accompanies those images. And again, some of you did this really well and others didn't write a single word. So now I'm like left drifting out here, fabricating what I think is happening with this work. This is very important. This is your elevator pitch. This is essential for when literally if you're in an elevator and someone says, oh, you're a photographer, what kind of photography do you do? You should have a less than 15-second, concise, humorous, if possible, take on what you do and how you do it. So make sure you add a little accompaniment with your work. All right, let me check the private chat, make sure I'm not dropping the ball. Let me look. And also, if I don't get to your work today, I don't know how Jackie feels about this. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but you could also maybe resubmit when the submissions become open again. You could always maybe think about theme. If you only submitted one, you could potentially submit a few more. You could add your written statement. Think about just sort of upgrading your presentation next time. Nothing bad happened. I'm totally fine with what was submitted. Everything was great. So Max said, I did everything wrong. Well, you're still here, Max. I don't know if I'm going to review your work today, but you know what? You submitted your work. And here's the thing. If you submitted, you won automatically because you actually did it. You followed through. Think of the number of people who thought, oh, I should probably do this and didn't, or the people that said, I should probably do this, but I don't know where my images are. I don't know how to edit. I don't know how to pull. Whoever's on here that submitted, you did it. You should congratulate yourself. That's the first step. And I'm going to give you, I think, legitimate feedback about your work. Okay. I'm about to share my screen. I think it's fair to say some of us will be doing a much better job submitting next time. That's okay. Remember, I started this nonsense in 1988. I've been doing this a long time. And in 1988, when you showed your portfolio, being destroyed by the person who you showed it to was the commonplace. There are stories of legendary editors throwing staplers at people's head. So that's kind of where we were. That was ridiculous. It was interesting to live through it because it puts some, as the Texans would say, it puts some hard bark on you, but it wasn't fun. And by the way, the last thing I'll say before we start looking at work, if you ever show your work to a photographer who absolutely destroys you, just take my word for it. It's not about you or your work. It's about them. They're unhappy. And I've seen this happen. I've seen really famous photographers. I saw one of these people do this to my wife once. He's just a miserable human being, this photographer. So there's no benefit in absolutely destroying someone. There's a benefit in constructive criticism. So if I say to you, whoever, Phil, Tina, Film Fiasco, if I say to you, I see this as kind of a C-level image, that is not a personal attack. A C is still in the middle of the scale. I was a C student in school, and look at me now. I'm almost well-adjusted. So it's going to benefit you. A C, just because someone says C doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Okay, time to present. I'm going to share my screen, entire screen, share, fingers crossed. Hopefully the Starlink gods are with us. All right, this looks like it might work. Okay, hopefully people can see this. Simon asked, where do we sign up for the Destruction and Personal Attacks webinar? That's coming. Maybe that's what's coming on the 30th. I don't know. I'm not going to share that secret. Hopefully, can you guys see my little blurb critique board things? Let me know if you can see this page right here. Someone? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Someone can see this spread? Anyone? Okay, you see it. Right on. Okay, so we're going to start out here with Zeni Aliyah. And I don't know if Zeni would be software update. No, we're going to skip that. I don't know if Zeni's online right now, but I happen to know Zeni. Zeni only sent one image. But Zeni is a really good photographer. And more importantly, Zeni is an unbelievable bookmaker. When I taught a workshop or co-taught a workshop in Albania, Zeni, who lives in Tirana, the capital of Albania, Zeni came to the class with a massive bag of basically his photo books, and they were absolutely astoundingly good. So when his name popped up, now a couple of things, look at this page. Look at, when I see this image, look at this amount of narrative of this text that Zeni gave me to understand the context of this image, which is why I'm showing you this work. Not only do I think this is a good photograph, but he's presented this in a way that if, many Americans don't know where Albania is. So you look at this and say, wow, I'm getting basically a written history of the context of what this photograph is. Now, I'm not going to read through all this, but that's nice. That's what it takes to really present your work. Photography is amazing, but the copy that accompanies it can often be just as critical. So let's look at this image a little bit here. Let me zoom in. So this is a nice frame. This is a nice frame. Couple reasons. One, this is a place called Durrës, and Durrës is on the coast. I would call it the Coney Island of Albania. It is awesome for photography. It is one of my favorite places in the world. Zeni obviously knows it really well. He's from that area. And this image is simple, easy to read, clear, garish, and it looks like he's popped in a little bit of fill flash to light up that side of this incredibly colorful, crazy looking thing. The rest of the frame is almost kind of monotone. If you sucked out this main character in the middle and took it away, it's a much more muted photograph. But this centerpiece is impossible to miss. But here's your obviously your focal point is here. I would call the foreground just sand. The foreground is just sand. There's not a whole lot happening there. This guy is actually in the midground, but you've also got like a secondary midground, both on the left and the right. And the spacing between these elements is really good because there's nothing overlapping here and there's nothing overlapping here. And these little streamers that are coming off, if I zoom in even more, these little streamers right here are highlighting these kids in the middle, which is like, that's luck. If Zeni tells me he did that on purpose, he's lying. I just know it because that's total luck. But hey, great photography and great part, especially reality-based photography, is about luck. You've also got this little midground, which works in tandem with this. And then your background are these children. And then also on the horizon, container ships. So your eye is able to navigate through this, but nothing is distracting from that center dude selling whatever this stuff is. I mean, who doesn't want a giant pink flamingo floaty for floating off of Durrës? So I think this is a very successful photograph. And my only thing is, man, Zeni, where's the rest of this? Like, I want to see a project from you on Durrës because it is a gold mine for photography. Simple, effective, clean. I would say relatively sophisticated photograph. It looks simple. It's not, because I know enough about Zeni to know that he is looking at all of these secondary elements. This is low-hanging fruit. Once this thing pops up on your radar, your brain says, I know there's a photograph to be made here. Now I have to work with the other components in the frame to make sure that it's a complete photo and not just a single bang. You know, if you shot this with an 85 and threw out the side, it's an okay picture, but not nearly as good as this. All right, so let me go back here to the thing. Love the ships in the background. Very nice photo, Zeni. Isn't the blue thing on the right distracting? So no, not really. This thing right here, there's a little container. He could have cropped it out, but I think it's, until I started looking at the sand in the foreground, which is really not what this photograph is about. I didn't even notice it until I looked at the foreground. So to me, this was so captivating that it didn't bother me. Could he crop it out? Yeah, he could crop it out. Not a big deal. I'm not, you know, most of the time I shoot in camera. I don't do a lot of cropping, but if I felt like it, you know what? Why not? Free country. I'm going to do it. Does that sound pretty good? Let's see here. Love the ships. Is blue thing on there? Checking. All right. Just checking in to make sure that everything is good. All right. Jerry Wade. Now, Jerry Wade, I know as well. I don't think I know Jerry in person, but I've seen that name popping up on my website and my YouTube channel. Jerry knows I'm a birder. I'm a bird nerd. I like birds. My specialty is misidentification of birds because I have no idea what I'm doing. I think I do. And then I realize I don't really know what I'm doing. But Jerry only sent one image as well. I don't remember, Jerry, if you sent any copy with this. It's basically a self-explanatory photograph. This is a photograph that is almost 100% based on content. And content can be the rule of the day. Content can be enough to carry everything. Let's talk about the Hindenburg. Remember the black and white photographs of the Hindenburg exploding and falling to the ground? No one was complaining about composition because the drama of what is unfolding on those frames. And by the way, if you want to talk about photographic skill, whoever did that, whoever the photographer was that made those frames, I think they shot something like 5 4x5 transparency frames in 30 seconds. That's just mind-boggling. But that's a picture that, you know, there's plenty throughout history that are not beautiful compositions. They may not even be sharp. Their exposure might be off. Doesn't matter because the content is so dramatic. We have a raptor that is devouring what looks like a squirrel. I've had evil thoughts lately because the local squirrel is completely basically gorging himself on my bird feeder and I can't stop him. And I am both in awe of his fortitude and also really ticked off with this squirrel. So this is a dramatic thing. It's beautiful. It's nature. The flare of the bird's feathers shot through a little bit of foliage. That helps as well. It's simple. It's clean. It's an easy read. This is a slam dunk. If you go, these are the kind of pictures that are used all the time. A lot of us who've been in the photography game for a long time, we always trick ourselves into thinking that the general public is like super sophisticated and likes all this sophistication and tilted frames and out of focus stuff. And frankly, they most of the time look at those pictures and say, why is this tilted? Why is this out of focus? They love stuff like this. So there's a million uses for a picture like this. And it's also a lot harder to make these pictures than you think. So I admire that, Jerry, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you sending that in. And I know there's a few other folks on here. Oh, and this is, I'm going to make some comments here. Again, I'm not your friend right now. I'm your editor. A lot of people, this is from Badger Edge. A lot of people would use AI to remove the branches. Don't use AI on your photographs. Don't even start. Don't use Photoshop to remove branches. Don't do any of that stuff. Let's keep it fun. Let's keep the challenge out there. I am not a fan of big image manipulation, but having said that, I studied photojournalism where if you were caught manipulating your files, you were fired immediately. If you were caught making a mistake on someone's name, you were fired immediately. If you made a mistake in a caption, you were fired immediately. There was a lot of ways to get fired back in the day because we had very strict photographic ethics about what you could and couldn't do. I think we've sort of drifted away from that. AI is very interesting. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to get more pervasive. But there is something to be like, hey, that's the real world. Those branches were there. I look at those branches and say, hey, that just upped the degree of difficulty from the photographer because you got to focus through that stuff. So, you know, I'd leave it. Congrats, Jerry. My wife loves that photo, thinks squirrels are evil garden saboteurs. I totally agree. They are crafty. I mean, crafty. All right, let's move on. This is from May. Now, I've never met, and I hope I am pronouncing her name right. I should know this. It's either May or Mai, and I think it's May. But May, if it's wrong, I'm sorry. I have emailed with May many times. She's an amazing person. And she works with some friends of mine out of Spain with Raw Society. And she's her own photographer and does a lot of other cool stuff. And she submitted some images here. Not a lot of writing with this, May. I would definitely include me a little more description of what we're looking at, because I think what we're looking at is two very different things. I see, let's look at this first image here on the left, on the top, these three boys with flowers, right? Simple, good color. These are not easy. This is not easy. This is not an easy age to photograph because little boys like this, especially being photographed by a woman, could be like really squirrely. Because I look at myself at that age and I was like such an awkward, dorky kid that it would have been tough. So you can tell they're a little bit nervous, but she's still close enough, kind of right on the border of their personal space to make a photograph like this. So to me, if this photo had completely failed, let's say that this photo didn't work at all, the fact that she got that close means she's doing something right. Because how many of you are terrified to photograph people you don't know? It's a skill. It's something you have to learn how to do. So I like this picture. And I also like it with this photograph here, a pairing, a diptych, because this is obviously clearly a protest going on. It's a police action. There's tear gas in the background. This is very different from this right here. However, anytime you have something like this going on in a society and culture, there's all kinds of normalcy going on at the same time. And so an image like this, to me, these two together are strong because it says, look, wherever this is, it could be Albania, Tirana, wherever, this is our country, our culture right now. This is happening. I love looking at pictures. That's why I want you to send more than one. I want to see them together because it gives me a better idea of who you are. Now, if we move down, let me see here. If we move down, we see this picture here, which is sort of what I would say a middle distance environmental portrait. The same with this, although this is a closer environmental portrait. And then the following one is also an environmental portrait. There is a similarity to these three frames. I think those three frames work together because they're of similar nature. Whereas the top two feel to me very different, which is fine, but I'm just looking at ways that these images would make sense together. You could choose any one of these bottom three to pair with this top protest image, but I do think this one still works the best. One, because you've got three boys in the frame and you've got multiple men in this right-hand frame. So the numbers, even though they're not even, the numbers still play well together from side to side. Also, I told you why I like this image on the left, these boys, because, you know, you've got to get inside someone's personal space. Let's face it, when you're in this type of scene, a lot of these people with their riot shields on and shields, they don't want to be photographed either. And they're not shy about letting you know that they don't want to be photographed. So the fact that she is in there and she is making these pictures, frankly, I don't care if it works or it doesn't work. You're in there. I've been in there. I've been shot and clubbed and gassed and kicked and everything else. So it's a lot of times in that scenario, you have to, you know, take what you get, because if you get too close, you're going to get zapped. So good job on that. I think if I was going to give May suggestions about the portraiture, I would say, number one, keep going. I think the light that she's photographing in, I think May has more opportunity to work with this light than what I'm seeing in these photographs. I think that there's a way of using the light that's there to add even more drama into these, which is maybe positioning these folks into where the lighting is more effective for her as a photographer. But again, I don't ultimately know what her goal is with these. And there's no write-up for me to say, okay, this fits into a certain narrative that I just don't know exists. So that's kind of how I look at those. But again, submitted, awesome, keep going. I do really like this as a diptych. I think diptychs and triptychs are really fun to think about. If you've watched any of my YouTube channels, I have a series called The Picture Package, which is a 3 to 5 image series that tells a mini story. And I think picture packages are a really fun way to photograph, because once you start linking what you have from picture package to picture package, then all of a sudden you've got enough material for a book or a magazine. If you have 3 to 5 from here, and 3 to 5 and 3 to 5, and all of a sudden maybe you take 3 or 4 from each group, suddenly you've got enough to make a book. That's pretty cool. That's why we're all here. All right, taking a look at the chat here. Make sure nothing is falling through the branches. Gentleman opening, Blind Husky likes the guy opening the gate. Phil asked, is it better to send a set of images from the same project than, yes, I do think, Phil, it's better to send me images from a project. I love telling stories with a camera. I think many of you do as well. And I think that there is making random single images is very challenging, but so is working in thematic form. And if you're talking about books and magazines, working in thematic form is kind of essential. All right, I'm going to move on, because we've only got half an hour left and I want to get to some Q&A at the end. So we're going to go to Megan. Megan is also someone that I've never met her in person, but I've met her online and we've exchanged some emails. So always fun. Megan, if I could describe Megan from what I know about Megan, is Megan took the ball and ran with it. Megan made a decision to make photography more a part of her life. And not only did that, but took off at warp speed, which is always commendable to see. And she also did something very intelligent that I think a lot of you could gain from, which is she turned the camera towards something that was very, very close to her, something that she had access to 24 hours a day, which was namely her children. And I think a lot of us dream about these fictional opportunities of the YouTube film that I'm going to release tomorrow. Somebody asked me about a 3-month photo project with just me and a fixer. And I'm like, what world are you living in? When am I going to get 3 months on a photo project with a fixer in some foreign land? It's never happened in my life yet, and it probably never will. So you have to take what you can get. And Megan decided to start photographing her around her kids. Now, this work, if I remember correctly, is from a couple of different things. The first photo is the first photo of the long-term project called Intimate Spaces. The next two, the car door and the boy on the beach, are part of my long-term personal project photographing my family called Intimacy of Motherhood. I'm trying to include more context in my pictures. The last two, the 8-year-old girls, are part of the long-term personal photo project following a group of 7 girlfriends. I've followed them for the past 2 years and hope to keep going for the next 20 years. So Megan's got a lot of stuff going on here. For me as a reviewer, that's a lot to keep track of. Okay, so I've got the Intimacy of Motherhood project, I've got the Intimate Spaces thing, and then I've got the 7 girlfriends project. So that's a lot for me to keep juggling in my head. I might, if I was Megan, I might say, okay, I'm just going to submit projects from one of those. I'm going to submit images from one of those projects, which is going to make it a lot easier for me to like wrap my head around the kind of depth that she has as a photographer. But there's a couple of things about this that I really like. And there's one thing about this that I'm not such a fan of. So I think there is a cohesiveness to these 4 images, right? There's a sophistication level of this image. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. This image is sophisticated. She's got an immediate foreground of this kid. She's purposely shooting through the window of the door. That is like one step above person with camera fumbling around shooting what's in front of them. She's looking at layers within the frame, foreground, midground, background. That's a successful thing. Plus, she does have a little bit of a subject here through that window, which is what makes the whole thing work. Foreground here, midground here, and background. There's a sophistication level to it. This image over here is what I would call like a peak action moment. This is a woman, her top is like someone's holding the top, putting sunscreen on. This is going to be there for 1 second and gone the next. I love peak action photographs. This is important. That's what Cartier-Bresson talked about for years. This is the decisive moment kind of thing. I like how close she is to the subject. She's right on top of this person to the right. And there's a little tiny group of kids over here in the background that sort of anchors that blank space on the left-hand side of the page. This image, simple, poetic. It's a moment. I love the body language. There's a sheen off of this kid that sets him apart from the rest of the actual scene. I love the meandering of the river, of the tidal pool that takes your eye from here all the way through the frame to the top. Simple photograph, but effective. And this is kind of interesting. It's an interesting crop, but there's some couple of little subtle things happening here that what make this photograph. But they take, and this is a lesson for Megan. I studied this picture, which is why I see this, and some of you might see it and some of you might not see it. And that's the risk that we run today, is getting undivided attention from people to look at our photographs. So I look at this and I'm like, okay, these are the teen girl things. So these are maybe the 7 girlfriends who've known each other. There is this hand right here pulling down the shorts, which tells me the self-awareness of the person being photographed. Teen girls, my guess is, are relatively self-conscious. If I'm basing on my nieces, 12 and 14, they're pretty self-conscious when Uncle Dan picks up the camera. And I love this gesture of pulling down the shorts. Like maybe the shorts were too high. Oh my gosh, I'm being photographed. I got to pull these down. The second thing is right here in the middle, which looks like the right hand of this girl on the right, like poking her friend in the stomach, which I love. I think that that's a really awesome gesture between what kids do when they're together. So I like that. There's a sophistication to those 4 that I like. And again, they're all black and white as well. They're not half color, half black and white for random reasons. She's cohesively shooting these in the same way. That's very important. The one image that doesn't do it for me is this one on the right. I just don't see the same. First of all, it's cropped into a square. It's the only one that's cropped into a square, which means it's an outlier immediately. And it's too kidsy for me. When I look at the sophistication of these things, I see, my head says, okay, I know where I can categorize this photographer. I know the skill level. So I know what I should expect. And I know what I want to see from her a year from now. Whereas this picture, even though like the mom is going to love this and this girl might love this, for me as an outsider, it's too kidsy. It doesn't fit with the rest of this group. So that's the one thing I will say about that. So, and I think Megan is going to reminds me of Sally Mann's work. Yes, Sally Mann called me one time when I worked for Kodak, and she called me and asked for a digital camera. And I thought it was a crank call and almost hung up on her. Yeah. But that was way back in the day. I was not nearly as intelligent as I am now. Okay, let's see here. I'm just checking the chat here to make sure I'm not missing anything. Have we got any good thing? Car shot. Thanks, Dan. Megan, you're here. That's awesome. Yes. Overall, great. I've seen a lot of your other work and all the things that you've sent me. Definitely that one picture to me is just not on the same level as the rest of them, but your stuff looks really good. And the fact that you're all in, you're dedicated. That's what it takes to make great long-term projects. And the fact that you've already worked on one of these things, the 7 girlfriends, for 2 years with another long long goal in mind over the years. It's commendable. So keep going. The next person we have here is, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Inez Ostruma, which is a great name, by the way. No idea what country that's from, but I'm guessing it's a country that looks a lot like what we're looking at here. Inez Ostruma, great name. I'm putting a little maybe Spanish accent on there, which I don't think fits, but hey, it's the only one I've got. So let's look at Inez. Now, you can tell by just taking a bird's eye view of this work that this work provides a certain feel immediately. And the reason I'm showing you these as a spread and not individual images is this is how I look at people. When I look at photographs, I don't often look at a photographer's work one single picture frame at a time. I'll take an overview bird's eye view. And then when I see an image, I either have a visceral, emotional reaction to that image or I do not. And if I do, it goes in the yes pile. And if I don't, it goes in the no pile. I just edited a body of work from a really good war photographer, 440 images to 40 to 11. And how I got from 440 to 40 was emotional, visceral reaction or not. And then how I got to 11 was based on the narrative of the story that we were trying to tell. So Inez, this is beautiful work. But again, there's 4 pictures here I love, and there's one that doesn't fit for me. I'm sure you can guess by now what that might be. But let's zoom in here a little bit. I love this picture here. It's simple. It's beautiful. It gives a sense of scale. It looks like it's shot from a drone, or maybe you're on a cliff top. Again, it's a little tiny human form in this amazing landscape. And if we zoom over here, same kind of feel. I feel like I don't really know exactly what direction this was made, but I feel like I'm at high up looking straight down. Although this could be shot potentially by you just standing, looking at the ground. I love these pictures together, again, as a diptych. The same here. So we've got human here on the left, human down below. We've got abstract landscape. We've got abstract landscape. And I think these as a set of 4 work incredibly well. Now they also work, you've got 1 vertical and 3 horizontal. So a triptych with this image, and this image, very strong. That makes me feel like it's part fairy tale, part Nordic adventure. And I love that. I do love this fourth photograph here. I think this is a really abstract, beautiful. I am not a landscape guy. I love the landscape. I love nature. I love being out there. I suck at landscape photography, and I don't look at a lot of landscape photography because most of it looks really similar. But these 4 images together are beautiful. I think there's a lot to work with there. This image, to me, is too cutesy, too family, too sunrise, don't need it. The color palette is completely different from the other 4. And again, it's too expected. Sunsets and sunrises, to me, there has to be a UFO landing on that beach for me to say, that's a picture I want to look at. So I don't think it's up to the standard of the other 4. And I just don't think it fits the mood, feel, or palette of the other 4. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, the family, the grandparents, everyone's going to love that picture. Me, I want these other 4 because they're beautiful, and you should keep doing this, whatever it is you call it. Maybe is there a write-up here? Did I miss the write-up? Maybe not. Okay. If I did, I apologize. Moving on. Abdul Hamid. Artist bio. A self-taught photographer, is deeply inspired by the beauty of everyday life and the power of storytelling. His work focuses on themes of home, belonging, and documenting daily life and experiences to archive for the future. How awesome is that? That is all I need. Good job, Abdul Hamid. That is a really nice little concise statement. Again, this is automatic cohesiveness to this body of work. He's showing me varied distances from this guy up close to middle distances here to far distance. And then this is my little outlier that I love, but we're going to talk about these other ones first. This one I love. The one thing that I would recommend to you to make this portrait a bit stronger, and this is going to be based on what kind of camera equipment you're using, and I don't know what you're using or whether or not this is going to be viable. If you have a chance to pose this person for a portrait, it's obvious that he's looking at you as the photographer and you have a chance to pose him. I love the fish head in the top. I love the tails coming out. I love the fact his shirt is undone and there's kind of a sheen of light coming off his skin. Move him 5 or 10 feet further forward. which will allow there to be more separation between him and the background, which will allow more fall off in the background, and the background will be less distracting. And it will be even more powerful and poignant because the viewer will have nowhere else to look but that face and that fish head. That's my advice on that piece. This is classic documentary work. I love this sort of middle distance. The folks are bringing in their fishing net. They're pulling things out. There's a sense of community. There's a little bit of a cohesive circle here that's going on where your eye comes in. And I also think one word on the side of the boat is a nice filler in that foreground. Same here. You know, you start here, you work your way in. This is another good sign that you're not standing back 20 feet sniping. You're moving yourself in and out of the scene that's happening in front of you. So we got in here and we're looking at, you know, a little bit tighter scene of the net. And if we pull over here again, clean this image that's pulled further back, it's giving me a little bit more of a sense of scale, location, where I'm looking at what most likely is saltwater. These people are, I don't know if it is saltwater. There's some of the lakes in Africa are massive. So I like the contrasting lines on the ship. I think this is a nice diagonal dynamic element right here with this slant of the hull. These guys are in the middle of doing something. Look at the body language. Look at this diagonal here through him and then up continued. Simple, clean, easy read. And oh, by the way, plenty of space up here to run some copy, run some text if you wanted to do that. And here's the outlier picture that I really like. And my question to all of you is, do you start with this image or do you end with this image? My feeling is you start with this image. This image makes me wonder, what is going on? Is this a baptism? Is this someone that's calling for help? Is this someone that's playing around? I don't know. It's simple. It's an easy read, but there's a little bit of mystery. And mystery means if I pause for even a millisecond and ponder what this means, it means that Abdul Hamid is winning to get my attention. So I like this, simple, clean. I'm also curious what these would look like in color. You might be a black and white only photographer, which is totally fine, but color, man, I can just imagine some of this color popping. But I do like this series. Again, classic, simple, cohesive. For all of you that submitted work, if you're submitting something on a theme, this is a good example of what I'm talking about. I can get an idea of who he is as a photographer by looking at the scenes. There are slight adjustments that I would make, like I mentioned in that portrait. How these are edited and sequenced is critical. I think those hands out of the ocean is a great place to start. And my advice to you, Abdul Hamid, is to keep doing this and keep submitting work. And if you can submit more, that's even better. All right. I'm going to keep going here for Rudolfo. I don't know if Rudy's on this call, but if he is, we should be able to feel him because Rudy is the classic Brazilian. Rudy's awesome. So I've seen work of Rudy from other places, and we communicate online. And actually, one of these pictures in this lineup was made. I was standing right next to him when he made it. So, but here's my interesting thing is I'm curious, Rudolfo, why you chose to submit these images, which is a bit outside of what I expected from you. There's a little bit more randomness here than I expected because I know for certain that you have thematic bodies of work. So, but I'm gonna talk about what you've submitted. The work here to me is about palette. It's about color as color. It's the Jay Maisels of the world. It's the Pete Turners of the world, the photographers who are known through the decades as being primarily color photographers, and a lot of Pete Turner, a lot of there's a few more. Jay Maisel I already mentioned. There's another guy who's Eric Miola is another guy. This kind of reminds me of that work, which is basically saying the color of these photographs are what is the primary driving mechanism of what they're about. Almost all of them. There is an outlier here at the bottom, this one that doesn't fit. There also, I think, this is sort of an outlier that doesn't fit either. This is at the, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. This is at the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. And again, this is an okay photograph. I know Rudy has better photographs, and I'm not entirely sure that that picture needs to fit with these three, because these three to me are where the interest lies. These are about landscape. These are about palette. These are about color. These are about minimalism. I think you can see that immediately when I put these three images together. There is a cohesiveness to these that where these two don't necessarily belong. Like this could be in the Atacama as well, but it could be like a cloudy day on the edge of the desert. And this again is okay, but like I've seen this before. Whereas these three make me go, all right, well, Rudy's got a little side of Rudy that I didn't know Rudy had. So this could be interesting as a pairing. Again, palette, purple, yellow, brown with a little tinge of turquoise. I like these. And you can tell even by the similarity of the shapes here. You got a little similar shape here and a little similar shape here. That helps bond those two together. And I'm a human fan. I like people. I don't like people in real life, but I like people in my photographs. So I like this little human element here. This would be an urban landscape perhaps, but it still works. You could tweak and play with the aesthetics or in terms of the sequence. Maybe I would do it like this. I don't know. This is up for debate. I would have to stare at these for a while. But again, there's nothing super sophisticated about these three pictures, but there's a reason he put them together. And I can almost guarantee you that that reason is about palette. And when you're a color photographer, there are plenty of times where palette is the primary driving mechanism and color is the primary driving mechanism, more so than the content or the moment or anything else. And I think that's what Rudy's really playing with here. And also Rudy can paint and draw. And I think there's a little bit of influence of that coming in here as well. But Rudy, I don't think you need these two other images. What I would do is look for more images that fit these top three. And I would start building a body of work that looks like that. All righty then. Anything else? Anybody trying to get me? 15 minutes left. Thank you, Jackie. That was Rudy. We're going to Zultan. Zultan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The Sassoon Docks in Colaba, Mumbai gives place to a wholesale fish operation. It's run by the Marathi people, an ethnicity group native to Maharashtra state in India. The market is colorful, chaotic, buzzing, yet it operates like clockwork. It was a fascinating feeling to witness and understand how a little bit of it worked. This was my first attempt of creating some order in the chaos with my pictures, but I plan to go back a few more times. More photographs that I'm not completely ashamed of can be found here. Okay, that is awesome too. You gave me exactly what you are doing. You gave me where this was. You added a little bit of humor. You mentioned this is your first attempt and you're going to go back and back again. That's music to my ears. That's what it takes to be a good reportage photographer, is returning to the scene of the crime again and again and again and building a body of work, which is what you've done here. Everybody just take a look at this cohesiveness of how these pictures look together. This one is a darker palette, but I have specific thoughts about that picture in general. But if you look at this picture and this picture and this picture and this one, they're all middle distance, reportage, color, cohesive, right? Now I can really put the screws to them and say, that's good enough or that's not good enough. This image on the upper left, to me, is like this scene setter. This is like the mood. If I just saw this picture first, I'd be like, where is this? I like this. It's moody. There's color. I'm clearly in a port. I see some people off to the left. There's action happening. I want to know what that action is. What's going on? This was probably before, like early morning, before the thing's kicking off maybe. And then as the light starts to come up, all the vendors are jockeying for position and they got their stuff going. So I like it. This picture, beautiful. I don't know where Zultan is from. I don't know if he's Indian or not, but if he's not, he is the one thing that doesn't belong in the scene, and yet no one is looking at him. And he's pretty close to these women. They're not looking at him. And also, look at the moment that's happening here. She's mid-stride. Her foot's off the ground. She's lifting up her sari. She's got this thing on her head, balancing, holding it. That's a great moment by itself. This one, adjusting something, holding a jug. She's mid-form in movement. And then look at this posture. That's fantastic. Great foreground, mid-ground, the blues of these fish, the color. This is where modern digital cameras just scream for color. It's beautiful, beautiful image. This is the one where all my vegan friends would run from the room, which is definitely worth showing. This is, great. This is kind of the reality of what's happening in that scene. I love it. I love the blood. I love the color. This dude's looking at you and he's probably like, is that a Nikon 810 or a Nikon 820? That's what he's thinking. And then these guys are chopping this stuff up. This is kind of a dramatic picture, but again, it fits the mood. It's awesome. I like it. And it's real. And now we're talking money. We're talking people here, a little action. I would say this is even though it might be important to tell the story because there's people looking at money, this is my least favorite photograph of the group. Whereas the bottom one, I love. This, my friends, is the decisive moment. This is the Alex Webb photo in Zultan's work that he submitted. Look at this moment right here. But look at the foreground. This woman not looking at him. He's right on top of her shooting, and he's like, you can kind of oddly shrink your physical space when you get good at documentary photography, where your energy doesn't like go out into the field. You can sort of contain it, which is what feels like he's doing. Good foreground. Mid-ground, look at this transfer of keys moment. The framing is perfect because underneath you got this guy chopping up some sort of fish here on the ground. This over here would be my only maybe critique. Maybe you crop this out. I'm not sure if this is adding anything, even though there's money being exchanged here. Don't know if you need that. I think from here down and over is like top. Love this picture a lot. Again, cohesive, interesting body of work. My advice, Zoltan, go back, keep working, build a body of work, resubmit the stuff. And then at some point you have to sit and be extremely critical with yourself or have somebody else come in and help you and be extremely critical about what's good enough to make the cut. Right now, I would eliminate this picture right here. Just my least favorite. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't, it's not as strong as the other ones. Hope that helps. All right. Thibaut, let me see if you, yeah, you gave me a little write-up. So these are pictures from different places: Sri Lanka, Milan, Mont Bromo in Java, and then the Kawal Iljan volcano in Java, and then Oslo at the end. So random pictures. Thank you for writing something, because I wouldn't know that these are necessarily random, and you're giving me a roadmap saying, yes, these are random, and here's where they're the location, the year, and a little bit of write-up about what's happening. I'm just going to look at these from the composition perspective and less about where they are and what the year is. So again, all black and white. I think, although this last one looks like it might have a little bit of color in it, or colored black and white. These are the first image. Interesting. Maybe a little tighter would have been a little better, because I'm not sure this stuff up here at the top is really adding anything in. And you could probably come in a little tighter down here to really bring in the viewer's perspective right into this sort of sweet spot in the middle. So maybe just a little bit of a crop, but there's nothing wrong. I like the sense of family, the sense of generations, where you have the kids and then the little boy that looks like he's just being introduced to life on the river. So that's nice. This one is interesting. This is a backlit photograph. I would say the lighting conditions here are not good during this photograph. And a lot of us end up in these places where we have to photograph in bad light. Not much you can do. But you've done it. It almost looks like there's a little strobe popped in, but that could just be the fill off of the ground throwing back so much light. It's nice because there is a diagonal of people moving here, but it's not my favorite photograph. But maybe if I saw it in context with a story about this school, then maybe I would want it more. Don't know. It's kids leaving a castle. There's pollen in the air that's falling. That does add to the frame. But again, not a bad frame, just trying to figure out where it fits in. Same with this one. I do like the sort of silhouette-y shapes of the people atop this rock. A little bit of a foreground. I love these sort of diagonal of the horses coming up and continuing across. Again, would love to see more work from one location as opposed to single images from multiple locations. This from the volcano, are these workers getting up there. I've seen a lot of work from this place before, and most of it's in color, so it's interesting to see this in black and white. I like your proximity to the people that you're photographing, because these other ones are at a distance. And as a documentary photographer, I want to see that you can get close, very close to people, because that's a different skill. So that's the thing I like about this picture. There's a sense of, there's a moment happening of this guy pulling this sled. You've got some foreground and some background here. Get even closer. That's my advice. And this is my favorite. The last image from Oslo is my favorite image by far. I think it's graphic, simple, easy to read. It looks freezing cold. Everyone loves sledding. You've got elements moving down both sides of the frame with this fence and this snowdrift over here, which is forcing, and basically the layout of how the positioning of the people, forcing people through like that. So this is a really solid image. Again, I would resubmit next time with 5 images from the same location. And that gives me more to work with. And then we can talk a little bit more about, areas to improve. All right, let me look here. We only got a couple minutes left. I could stop here and do some Q&A, Jackie, or do you think I should do one more? So maybe we stop and I do a couple of questions because we only have 5 minutes left. So, and again, we're going to do this more. So Brittany and Christine and Bastian, I'm sorry, but we'll get to you. One of the questions is from Idrea. Is aspect ratio really all that important in a series? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that, okay. Is aspect ratio important in a series? It doesn't really make me like a picture more or less or make something feel it doesn't belong. I am not a fan of random or inconsistent aspect ratios. That is not a sign really of how things are done in the book world or the photography world, because typically what you're looking for is cohesiveness and consistency. And if I'm looking at 35 millimeter aspect ratio, and then all of a sudden there's a 6x6, I'm like, okay, well, why is that 6x6 there? Is there going to be another one? Does it mean that when I see a 6x6, does that mean something, which is called visual hierarchy? If I'm looking 35, 35, 35, 35, 6x6, my head says, okay, but why is that 6x6? Does that signify, is that a portrait series? And the next time I see a 6x6, there's going to be another portrait? Or maybe that's a chapter head. Maybe every chapter of the book starts with a 6x6 portrait. That makes sense. But in the middle of a photographic essay, to change your aspect ratios doesn't make sense to me if you're thinking about cohesiveness of a story. And that's really, if I look at the traditionally published photographic books I have, which is somewhere between 300 and 400, changing aspect ratios is not very common. There might be a handful of those books that do that, but I can't think of any of them off the top of my head. There tends to be a consistency. But prove me wrong. Do something, design it, show me, prove me wrong. Okay, from Simon, how did you select which submissions to review? And will prior submissions remain in the pool, or will we need to resubmit every time? I believe, and Jackie can help me out here, but I think the submissions will remain in there. But if you wanted to resubmit, you can. And what I did was I tried to choose a variance in the kind of work that people submitted. So I had a couple, somebody I didn't get to just submitted one. Zeni just submitted one. I tried black and white documentary stuff. I tried color. I tried palette. I tried more like the last person we looked at had 5 images from 5 different places. So I tried to mix up the kind of work that was submitted. And, it was other than that of trying to make every person a little bit different, because I felt that each individual person was probably representative of a larger group of people. And okay, from Chris, Dan, for you as a reader, what do I as the writer need to answer or build from an image? You don't need to describe to me what's in the image. I can see it for myself. What I'm curious about is the story. Like, what story are you trying to tell? And why am I looking at these photographs? And that's, again, an elevator pitch of like, hey, this is why I think this work is important. This is what the story is. But don't describe to me what's in the image, because I can make it out for myself outside of, hey, this is, if you're submitting random images, yeah, maybe this is India, this is Java, this is, Milan. That's a nice little starting point for me to be able to say, okay, well, these are all from different places. But other than that, I don't really, if you're having to describe what's in the photo, then the photo is probably not that good. You want, again, to be this visceral emotional reaction based on your light, your timing, and your composition. That's really what we're all after here, is to make work that just resonates. And then when I say to myself, man, this person is really good. What is this? Like, what is this story? Then I turn to the write-up and I get that information I need. Okie dokie, let's see here. I told you I was going to be nice. So we have 1 minute left. And Rudy asked if this is being recorded. Yes, I believe it is. For posterity. for all the world to see. And for those of you I didn't get to, I apologize. Again, you know, there's so many submissions, and I don't want to just blaze through and say, like this, don't like it, don't like it. I think there's a much greater context. And I think pretty much everybody I looked at is coming to photography from a different direction for different reasons. And so everybody's a little bit different. There's no one size fits all. Again, yeah, Christine, I'm so sorry. You saw your name. You were on tap. I think you're a Seattle street photographer, if I remember correctly. We'll keep your photos on file for next time and submitting. Bastian, you're on there as well. You're going to be on the next one. I just added you in this morning, and I'm sorry I didn't get to you. But again, trying to be as helpful as possible to the people oh, San Francisco. Sorry, Christine. I had the West Coast right. But anyway, that is our 1 hour. Again, I appreciate this. This is a blast. I could do this all day long. And it's like photo school without being yelled at. So all good. And that's all she wrote. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time. Hi, Zeni.